And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather again, not much going on out here over the Bering Sea. Light winds, dry conditions, and next storm pulling northward here and then northwestward, bringing gale and storm force winds to the southeast coast. High wind watch out for Prince of Wales Island, Ketchikan, for possible gusts of 60 miles per hour, drying out across southern Alaska. And winter weather advisories continue tomorrow for the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, and the hilly areas around Fairbanks for several more inches of snow. This storm, again, gale and storm force winds, slowly weakening, starts to pull west-northwest a little bit, or northwest. They're staying off the coast. Next one down here should move off to the east and give a break here. As you can see, for Tuesday, still some showers for the Panhandle, but winds a lot lighter and precipitation lighter as well. That low continues to weaken in the Gulf here, keeps it unsettled for the North Gulf Coast. Areas of showers with cloudy skies in the eastern and northern interior areas. Sunshine for Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and nothing going on out over the Bering Sea except way back there to the northwest, something finally showing up out that way. And then for tomorrow, coastal water forecast, gales for the south coast, south to southeast, 35 knots with higher gusts. Storm warnings here on the central coast. Southeast 50 knots, seas 16 feet. And then the north coast, east-southeast, 25 to 30 knots. Lynn Canal, north winds, 35 knots for Tuesday. Southeast 35 for Stevens Passage. Gale warnings also in the forecast for Clarence Strait, where seas will be 18 feet to go along with the south winds at 35 knots. And then much lighter winds in store for Tuesday here on the north coast, southeast 10 to 15 knots, central coast east-northeast at 15 knots, and northeast 15 knots with 10-foot seas here on the south coast. Southern interchannels north at 15, Stevens Passage north at 10 knots, and Lynn Canal, south winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Prince William Sound in the North Gulf Coast, winds northwest at 20 knots for Tuesday. Got gale warnings for Barren Islands here, Kamishak Bay, northwest winds at 35 knots, 8 to 10-foot seas. Cook Inlet, north winds 10 to 15 knots, seas 3 feet. And for the day on Tuesday, Cook Inlet, north winds 10 to 15 knots, 2 to 3-foot seas. And good gales here for the Barren Islands at Kamishak Bay for west-northwest winds at 40 knots. Western North Gulf Coast, north at 15. Eastern North Gulf Coast, east-southeast at 15 to 20 knots, and Prince William Sound, east winds 15 knots, seas at 3 feet. Kodiak Island tomorrow, small craft advisories for west-northwesterlies at 30 knots. Alaska Peninsula, northwest 25 knots, gust to 40 knots here out of the southern bays on the peninsula, north 25 for Bristol Bay. And for Kodiak Island, west-northwest 30 knots on Tuesday. Lighter winds for the peninsula here, out of the northwest 15 to 20 knots, Bristol Bay northwest at about 20 knots, seas 7 feet. Eastern Aleutians, north to northwest winds for Monday at 20 to 25 knots. Variable 10 to 15 knot winds for the western and central Aleutians. And for the day on Tuesday, starting to respond to that front farther to the west there, southwest 25 knots from Kiska to Shimia for Tuesday afternoon. Otherwise, west 15 to 20, Amchitka Island. Light variable winds for Adak and Atka at 10 knots, seas down to 4 feet. And west-northwest winds, 15 knots for the eastern Aleutians. And for the southwest coast, north winds 15 to 25 knots, strongest south of Nunivak Island. St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, north winds 10 to 15 knots, northwest 15 for St. Matthew Island. And St. Paul and St. George looking at northwest winds Monday at 20 knots with 6-foot seas. Those will become west at 15 knots on Tuesday. Light variable winds here over the northern Bering Sea and around St. Matthew Island. And then northwest winds 15 knots for the southwest coast and St. Lawrence Island. And gale warnings tomorrow for the central and eastern Arctic coast. Winds out of the east at 35 knots there with 6 to 8-foot seas. Small craft advisories for the western Arctic coast for east winds at 25 to 30 knots and the Chukchi Sea north to northeast 15 to 25. And for the day on Tuesday, north to northeast winds for the Chukchi Sea 20 to 25 knots. Small craft advisories for the remainder of the Arctic coastal areas. Northeast 25 to 30 knots for the central and western coast. and northeast at 30 knots with seas just under 10 feet for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast.